Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to session 55 of the Behavioral Observations podcast. I am really psyched to share this episode with you. This episode is basically the extracted audio from a Facebook Live conversation that I had with Dave Stevens, who's the co-founder and director of Chartlytics. And it wasn't originally intended to be a podcast episode, but Dave's enthusiasm for our field, especially coming to it as an outsider, is really infectious. And there's tons of great stories about the use of our science in very different settings than what we're used to seeing. And it's also a great dissemination story. There's so many good things rolled up into this that, again, I couldn't help but to share it to a wider audience. So if this is something you want to see more of too, let me know. These Facebook Live kind of mini interviews, I've done a couple of them thus far, and they've been a lot of fun. They're a little bit more impromptu. I think we took many kind of random left turns, or at least I did, in this conversation. I think at one point I was talking about Matthew McConaughey's Lincoln Continental commercials. Hopefully it'll make sense when we get to that part of the conversation. So we mentioned a ton of resources in this episode, and you can find those at behavioralobservations.com. And we'll get to Dave's conversation here with me in just a minute. I just want to mention a few quick housekeeping items. One is that we are now on YouTube and on Alexa smart speakers, I guess. Is that what they call them? I don't have one. But I do know that if you go to an Alexa and say, play the Behavioral Observations podcast, that I think that works. A couple other things. We also now have some Behavioral Observations merchandise. So whether it's t-shirts, totes, coffee mugs, phone cases, etc., you can go to behavioralobservations.com and click on the merchandise tab and see what we have to offer. If you do buy something too, take a picture of it and tag me on Instagram. I'm at Behavioral Observations. Another announcement is that I have a special for newly minted BCBAs trying to get their continuing education. So if you go to behavioralobservations.com and click on the For New BCBAs, I've got a special deal on Type 2 CEs you can check out there. I think that is it for housekeeping, if you will. So without any further ado, please enjoy this fun conversation with Dave Stevens.
Welcome to the Behavioral Observations podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third or fourth Facebook Live that we've done here at Behavioral Observations. These are things that we may do more of. Let me know, by the way, if these are things you want to see more of.
If you want people to see more of these, you're going to need different guests than myself. Okay?
So speaking of, let's introduce our guest. I am really excited to be talking with the co-founder of Chartlytics, which is now a Central Reach product, and we'll talk about what that means, Dave Stevens. So I met Dave, we started talking several months ago, and I knew him as the co-founder of Chartlytics. And when I was chatting with you, Dave, I just assumed that you were a behavior analyst because of the depth and breadth of your knowledge, particularly of precision teaching, and that's not the case apparently. So why don't you tell us, because even though we've hung out and stuff like that, I still never got around to asking the question about, like, okay, you're not a behavior analyst. How did you get involved with starting a company that basically is based around the science of behavior? So,
no, it's a late night in a poker game. No,
that's right. It was in a back alley of.
Yeah. No, so my background's been in enterprise software, starting software companies. I was in a totally different industry. In my last company, we sold really boring software for large manufacturers to manage their parts and service businesses. And we sold that in 2010. And I sort of just took a break. I relaxed. It was like a 10, 12-year death march to get that thing all done. And during the time I was doing some consulting, just trying to stay a little bit active. And one day out of the blue, one of my mentors from my last company said, "Hey, Dave, it's time to get off the bench. Why don't you come to this thing we're doing?" And this thing was Penn State University. As like many universities, they have they're trying to foster entrepreneurship and get the research out, commercialize the research. So typically, universities are really good at doing research, but they don't commercialize it and make it accessible. And so Penn State started this program called the Techcelerator program for graduate students and professors to go through basically a business boot camp, create a business plan around whatever the research or the technology you were working in was going to be. And at the end of this, I don't know if you're familiar with SharkTank.com or the Dragon up in Canada, the pitch show.
Yeah, I know the
right?
show, right?
So at the end of this, they do a kind of a Shark Tank pitch thing where everybody that goes through the boot camp has to pitch their idea. And I got asked to be a panelist because I have a problem. I keep starting companies. And so, I got to see a bunch of people come through, and it was really kind of interesting. And one person in general, you might be able to guess who was there, was Dr. Rick Cabina. So this was in December of 2013. So that night when he did his pitch, I was sitting there going, what in the world? If this is real, what is wrong with us? Why aren't we not using this like science that we know, we know how to teach, right? It's a known thing. There's no ambiguity in it at all. We know how to teach. And I was like, why isn't anybody using this? And I come to find it's a paper, precision teaching. So that night was my first introduction to precision teaching. And it didn't even get into ABA, actually. It was literally just on precision teaching. And I think his presentation was more focused on like special education kids, tier 2, tier 3 type kids who were, reading and math was kind of the focus of his presentation. And so I was very interested. Rick didn't win that night because he couldn't get his videos to play. He still has trouble with videos playing in his presentations. So, but I was fascinated. So we actually got together. We were having lunch. We were, we just kind of talked for 3 or 4 months, and I learned more and more about everything and the applications of this, this precision measurement, precision teaching science. I was just enthralled. I was like, I wanted to know a lot more, and we went through a bunch of different ideas for how we might be able to take something like what he was proposing to market, and we formed Chartlytics, I think May 21st, 2014 is when we signed our operating agreement.
So that's May 21st. Okay, so you just kind of rolled over another milestone, apparently.
We did,
Nice.
Yeah. Actually, our four-year anniversary, and we we'll talk about what happened the day after our 4th year anniversary in a little bit. But that was my first introduction. That was my first introduction to precision teaching, and we set out to basically make precision teaching accessible. So if you've had any exposure to the standard acceleration chart, it's this paper-based thing. You have these finders. It's a very manual process, and it takes time, and it's generally hard to train because you have to spend a lot of time, with it. So we set out to digitize that and make it accessible.
What was your first impression, I guess? I don't know if you recall this, but what was your first impression of looking at the chart itself when Rick showed you the chart, where you're like, what the hell is this thing? Like, this is just like lines and stuff like that? Or did you... I know you have a tech background.
So I have a semi-engineering background, and I understand the benefits of ratio charts when you're trying to flatten out curves, right? So I got it once I don't have a whiteboard with me, but all learning is sort of an asymptotic curve. It starts out slow, it goes exponential, and it tailors off when you get to the upper limit of that behavior, right? So think about typing on a keyboard. You can only go so fast, right? Sure. There's a physical limit, and so learning starts out slow, gets exponential, and tailors off again. It's an S curve, right? And so when you're dealing with those types of things, like using ratio charts to flatten out these curves and understand rate of growth and trends, it was familiar to me.
I see.
So when I saw, and you've been through Rick's presentation, he explains it very brilliantly.
So let me just jump in real quick because I have
I did not.
So anyway,
have that
I wasn't afraid. Okay.
I see. No, I want you to continue on, but I just had a quick comment because I did not have that experience. I was kind of like, but I have a friend of mine who is an Ivy League math major, right? And I showed him the chart, and he looked at it for a second. He's like, "Oh yeah, this makes sense."
Yeah.
So it's just kind of funny. It's almost like a personality test in many respects. I took the history of math in college.
It's the new Rorschach,
That's
right?
That's right. Yeah. So, anyway, go on.
That's going to be a new test. Okay.
Go ahead.
That's funny. So anyway, the chart, honestly, the ratio chart is very interesting. It helps you understand trends. And so because curved stuff is hard to figure out where it's going to go. So if there's curves in your not linearly scaled graphs, it's hard to project where that's going without like some math. So the ratio chart's pretty helpful in that. The other really important piece of the chart is that what I've come to find is just it boggles my mind. I'll come back to that. But it's the standardization of the ratios of the x and y axes. So there's it's called trend line anchoring. Okay, I actually have a paper I found from like 1905 of why that's so important. So the thing with the trend line anchoring, right? Like so in ABA we make decisions based on trends, variability, trends, and level, right? That's how you're supposed to do visual analysis. And trend line anchoring, what it does is for the same growth rate, your trend line is always at the same angle. It never changes. So 50% growth rate is always here. 100% growth rate, what we call times 2, is always here. That angle never varies. And if you think about the sort of stretch to fill graphs that most of ABA, most of everybody uses, even business.
It's terrible in business.
Oh, it's off the charts. It's everywhere. It's not. It's off the chart, right?
That's right. Totally.
It's like, totally off the chart. What happens is, So what happens is, as you're stretching that, the angle is changing of your trend line, and in ABA, what's the common thing? If it's low to moderate, continue or make a change. If it's high, change, right? But what's that mean? Low, moderate, high. If you're able to squeeze and change the slope of that trend line, you can't necessarily even compare one graph to the other. Mm-hmm. Your whole decision making framework, the frame that you're using to make a decision, is variable and subjective. So the cool thing about the standard acceleration chart, and it's literally just because it's been locked to a certain ratio in terms of x and y, is that trend line never changes. This is always 10% growth. This is always 50% this growth. It's 100% growth.
Yeah.
So those two features, I think, it was unbelievably clear when I saw it. And the day it came, I went to there's a conference of chart geeks called the International Precision Teaching Conference. In fact, it's in Seattle. You should come.
Okay.
We'll make you an honorary chart geek. But I went in. I think I went 2015. So we're working on Chartlytics. We started in May 2014. We're building our first prototypes. We used Rick's professor at Penn State in special education. We used his class to kind of alpha test the whole thing. It was kind of fun. I had college students, QAing our software.
There you go.
But I went to the IPTC in November. I think it was in I don't even know where I was. I think it was St. Pete's, Florida, and I was sitting in a room. I go and a presentation, and the opening slide was a chart, and collectively, within 2 seconds, the entire audience goes, "Oh!" And I'm like, "What?" So what happened was, because this chart is so standard, you had 100 people immediately in 2 seconds understand what was going on with the data on the chart. So didn't have to understand the legend. Yeah, go ahead.
Right, so they didn't have to orient themselves to the axes.
No orientation. Yeah. 2 seconds. It was collective. You could immediately see that this was going to be, we're talking about a behavior that's going in the wrong direction. And I was like, well, that's why standards are so important. How often do you spend time just figuring out what's on the graph, right?
Right. So
when you're working,
I think what I appreciate about what you've done as someone who's coming to our field from a very different walk of life, and you foreshadowed it a second ago, and you said you went back and found some paper from 1905 or something like that. You have gone back and read all of Skinner's stuff, it really is remarkable, that and it's very unusual for someone who, kind of yes, you can bite the ABA hook, but I at least in my anecdotal experience, it's very rare for someone to go back and be reading the behavior of organisms and looking for papers from 1905 and things along those lines. So that is pretty commendable, because I think there are aspects of behavior analysis that way more about than most of the BCBAs walking around these days. So
I'm still
cool.
Be careful there, because I'm still trying to figure out DRO versus DRL. What is that?
Okay, all right. Well, I think you're pulling my leg, but that's
literally
if you can
trying
figure
to keep
out
all these acronyms.
Yeah. I think that's a very trainable thing. So
yeah, I need some SAF meds.
There you go. We'll go over that offline later.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
So, anyway, so I just want to take just pause for a second and just say hello to folks. We're getting a lot of thumbs up and comments. So, Aaron, Megan is chiming in many times as we would expect. Rebecca Byers, hello. Nicholas, Ronnie, Genevieve, Gemily. Oh, look, it's Megan again. Cynthia, Canary, Maggie, Kathy. Kathy says everyone should come to the IPTC conference. Malia wants to know, what are we talking about today? Well, we're going to get to that. So there's been some big changes at Chartlytics. So Chartlytics has graciously sponsored the Behavioral Observations podcast, going back almost 15 episodes, starting with session 39 when we had Rick on. And through that process, I've gotten to know you guys, gotten to hang out with most of the Chartlytics crew. And so a couple of weeks ago, I saw a post on Facebook and said something to the effect of, "Hey guys, we are honored or psyched or whatever to be merging with Central Reach." And I was like, "What?" And I immediately texted you, Dave. I'm like, "Hey, that's not that." I'm not exactly sure what the ramifications are about it, but that sounds pretty cool. So I want to have you on, not just to kind of get the story of how you encountered precision teaching and behavior analysis more broadly, but talk about the acquisition or merger with Central Reach and what the ramifications are for current users of Chartlytics or future users of Chartlytics or people who are involved in the Central Reach universe and things like that. Where I think I'd like to start, though, is maybe talking about what. So we kind of have a foundation of that. Chartlytics is this company that you and Rick created to kind of digitize and systematize the practice of precision teaching through automating the chart. And you guys have done that as well as done tons of workshops. And I'm probably leaving off a whole huge laundry list of things that you've been about.
There's a lot of bruises and cuts on that journey. So
yeah, for sure. So we know what Chartlytics is, or at least have some sort of idea. For those who aren't familiar with Central Reach, why don't you take a minute to talk about what Central Reach is and what they do and things like that. And I should also note that you're at the mothership, right, at Central Reach. So all those things going on behind you, or you're in the HQ, if you will, the bunker. So fill us in on that. Tell us a little bit about what that company does.
So Central Reach is the largest practice management platform focused on ABA today. So they started in a market around 2013, and now there's about 50,000 users, almost 300,000 clients on the platform. And Central Reach is it's a very broad application in terms of what it can do. So scheduling, billing, documentation management, revenue cycle management for ABA companies. They have a whole clinical module where you can take all the clinical data, ABC data, a lot of non-standard charts in there, and they're arguably the leader in the space right now, especially for size. And I think collectively, one of the reasons that we were, so the next question is, so why Central Reach? And when Rick and I started Chartlytics, we kind of committed to each other that we would only focus on the clinical aspects of the standard acceleration chart and precision teaching, right? Like clinical decision making, or clinical educational decision making was our focus, and we didn't really want to build all these other tools because there are many practice management solutions out there, and we didn't feel like we should spend many resources because quite honestly, building out the standard acceleration chart and the workflows of precision teaching to digitize them, this is a 10-year roadmap of all the things that we want to do here. And if you dilute yourself, you're only able to do a little bit of each. And so we wanted to stay very laser focused on precision teaching. And so we always knew we were going to have relationships with practice management software, right? Because no one wants to have silos of data. People are already fighting silos of data. I have some data in paper. I have some data in Excel. We have some people over on the email. We have a platform for this. We have a platform for that. And that's not really a good, an optimal way of managing that kind of stuff. And so we always knew we were going to have to work with other practice management platforms that do the billing, that do the scheduling, that do all that stuff, right, with how you manage and run your ABA business. And so we started talking to companies about last quarter, so the end of last year, I guess. It's not last quarter, end of last year, so 2 quarters ago. Started talking to people and just feeling things out. And then one day we got an email from Central Reach and said, hey, we identified you as the best in breed for clinical decision making. We think we're the best in breed in practice management, and we should talk. And I was like, yes, let's talk. So that's how that all got started.
Clinical Behavior Analysis, or CBA for short, is Kentucky's expert provider of applied behavior analysis, counseling, and direct support services to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, acquired brain injury, and autism. And they're about to open the Center for Behavior Analysis, a 13,000 square foot state-of-the-art facility in Louisville, Kentucky. And they're looking for a clinical director to lead a highly motivated team of BCBAs and technicians. If you're not familiar with Louisville, it's been rated by U.S. News & World Report as one of the nation's best places to live. With a low cost of living, your industry-leading salary and signing bonus will go a lot further. And with an abundance of cultural and recreational activities, you will not lack for fun things to do. So to learn more, go to cbacares.com/careers and set up your confidential interview today.
Wow, that's cool. Because I was about to ask the how question, how you guys got hooked up. So that takes care of that.
Yeah, they reached out to us. So we've been doing these workshops. We've been doing our marketing, our social media. We really increased because we're not trying to sell the chart anymore. We're trying to sell the results. That if you can simplify and standardize the way you take data and the way you make decision, you get these accelerated outcomes, and they almost come for free. It's a lot of hard work, and I don't mean to kind of say it. It's just by doing these simple things, you get these crazy outcomes with your kids. You just break through barriers. And we've been doing a lot of work to kind of start educating the market that precision teaching is not this blue chart, use this blue chart, use this blue chart. It's really, we're after outcomes, and we're after the fastest way we know how through science to do so. And,
yeah, that's cool.
So our marketing's really helped. And our awareness building with the workshops and things like that really helped us get to the point where we're thought of as sort of the leader in clinical decision making.
Well, if I can just piggyback on that point, so it sounds like that, there's, and I know you probably heard this a million times having a business background, but I think there's a lesson for dissemination there, because it sounds like you were selling the benefits and not the features, and that's kind of an old cliche in marketing, right? You don't. When you sell a car, like the Lincoln commercials, right? They've got Matthew McConaughey driving around looking cool in his Lincoln, and they're not talking about power windows. They're not talking about, air conditioning or, GPS or whatever. It's Matthew McConaughey looking cool, and that's obviously the fantasy-based benefit of having a Lincoln.
Sure.
And they don't talk about any of the actual nuts and bolts of the vehicle itself. And so it sounds like you guys weren't, obviously in a more genuine way, we're talking about the benefits that occur when you use the chart, not necessarily like, times 1, times 2, or, 6 cycles and et cetera. So, we talk about dissemination all the time in behavior analysis. And I think as behavior analysts, we geek out over those features and oftentimes don't sell the benefits. So anyway, that's kind of
there's an amazing and honestly, this wasn't by design. Like we were selling the features of the chart. We're selling the little blue lines that squish together as you move up. We transitioned in I'd say early mid 2017, so just last year, to start really focusing on what we're actually selling. And our actual work, I talked to a bunch of our customers, and they all would say, like, you help me standardize things. This helps me, know what to do. It gives me confidence in making decisions. And we're like, wow, they're not saying like we digitize precision teaching. They're not saying we make the chart easy to use. They're saying these benefits of what it allows them to do. Like, where's the value? And that was kind of a light bulb in my head. And then I don't know, end of the summer last year, early fall, I saw a video by Simon Sinek. He has this TED video, and it's understanding your why, and we should put it in the comments here. It's amazing, and it talks about your why, your what, and your how. Almost everybody markets their how and not their why. Mm-hmm. And we just started going out, why is Chartlytics here? And Chartlytics is here to help you make quicker, more confident decisions more frequently so you can drive accelerated outcomes. That's it. That's our why for existence. Our why is to bring precision teaching to the world. And we do that by digitizing it, making it very accessible and easy. And the reason why and that's our what. And then our how is you log into the website, you touch all these buttons, and you do these things, right? We were selling those how things. We weren't selling the whole why. And when we switched to the why, everything changed for us.
All right. I think I found that talk, so I'm going to drop that right in the comments here. Awesome. Yeah, and I think, again, this is a conversation that we need to continuously have in our field as we try to break out of the pigeonhole of just providing services, to young kids on the spectrum. Not to say there's anything, not to say there's anything wrong about that, of course. As Pat Fryman says, more of that, please. But breaking out from underneath that.
Well, yeah. So what's the fundamental why of ABA?
To solve socially important problems.
Okay. So what about in the context of most ABA providers today? We're focused on essentially autism at the moment.
So I'm sorry. What
like if you were talking to an ABA center who's their bread and butter is coming from essentially a autism service provider, right? They're helping kids with autism, and so what I see as ABA, and not to obviously the ABA is universally applicable to any human behavior, but for somebody listening, it's like, well, how do I use the why in my messaging? I'm marketing to parents. What we're selling is independence.
Yes.
We're selling independence, right? Why do we do what we do? Independence. We want everybody to have independent, lives where everybody can reach their potential, regardless of where they're starting from, right? And so, that's how I see ABA, right? Everybody, we want independence. We want to reach our potential.
Yeah.
Right? So,
it's interesting. Excuse me. I know, you listen to the show, and you've probably heard many episodes we've done on ACT, and it kind of almost reminds me of the values clarification process of. And I was doing a training yesterday with some folks who work with kids with emotional behavioral challenges in school settings, and I said, I know this sounds kind of like your junior high guidance counselor stuff, but ask the kids like what they want to do with their lives, and maybe relate these obstacles that they need to confront on a day-to-day basis towards that. And I use the term independence, and I use that kind of interchangeably with freedom, right? It's like, especially kids who are in very difficult circumstances, and like they want to get out of their home, probably many times for good reasons, because not a lot of good things might be going on there, and so you could, so that anyway, so I can go on about that. But anyway, so the larger point is, kind of identifying those values seems really important. So.
Agreed. And I'm fascinated about ACT and some of the RFT stuff that folks are doing. It's really interesting to me how you can combine and I had an amazing conversation with Dr. Kevin Polk from the ACT Matrix frame, and we were talking. He's like, shh, don't tell anybody. I'm sorry, Kevin, if you're going to watch this. Don't tell anybody, but ACT Matrix is really just radical behaviorism, And I was like, oh. It was a great conversation, though.
I'm going to have the week after next, I'm going to be interviewing Nick Barron's.
Oh, awesome.
from Fit Learning.
From
As you know,
Fit, yeah.
we've had Kim on, and Kim's actually talking at New Hampshire ABBA. We'll put a plug in for that. More on that
Nice.
later, folks. So Nick reached out to me, and he's like, I want to talk about RFT, and I want to talk about it in relationship to teaching critical thinking skills and things like that. So we're going to do kind of like an RFT 101.
Oh, nice.
And he's going to relate it to precision teaching. And we're going to do this only in an audio format, which is going to be scary as hell for me. I'm like, how do we do this? He's like, don't worry about it. We'll be fine. So,
okay.
I was like, all right, well, every RFT talk has like all these arrows and image, and he's like, don't worry, I got it. So
he's got it. Okay.
So anyway,
that's going to be great.
So let's get back to the merger here. I put out a call for questions, and folks, if you do have questions about the merger, drop them in the comments here. But I got a couple of questions on Instagram that I can't really find right now. That's probably why I wasn't totally listening to the question that I biffed on earlier. Because I was like, I know there's a question here. I'm a bad multitasker. So if you are a current Central Reach user, what are the implications?
So the near-term implications are right now. So our companies are now one. We have merged Chartlytics fully into the Essential Reach family. We're going to be a module within Essential Reach, while also still being sort of a separate product that we can deploy in novel markets and be opportunistic there. But for our ABA, SLP, OT, probably given our K through 12 special education markets, we'll be able to go in there now with much more capabilities than Chartlytics had on its own in terms of managing the process, documentation, and all that stuff. But what it means is that there will be an integrated experience. So there'll be one set of users and one set of clients, and Chartlytics will share that client information with the clinical notes and billing processes that Central Reach, has best-of-breed applications for. So our intent is to have a very seamlessly unified experience, but that's a roadmap, right? That's going to take us some time. We have some near-term goals, mid-term goals, and then eventually total integration of the platform while still allowing Chartlytics to be sort of opportunistic and getting the chart in other places.
I see. All right, so we got some questions here. Roxanne says, will you be offering more teaching within Central Reach?
100%. So Central Reach has a marketplace right now for content. It is content, I think, that's mostly been focused on kind of like HIPAA compliance training. It's like the best-selling course they have for customers. They want to train everybody for HIPAA. And there's a couple other ones like that. But we have the Precision Teaching University at Chartlytics, which has, I don't know now, it's probably close to 100 hours of precision teaching training through our webinars that we've done and the courses that Rick and the team, Amy and Shelby, are starting to develop courses for that too now, and Sal as well. But yeah, all the training and content's going to come over. We intend to make it very kind of an integrated experience with curriculum. So if you want to do some free operant-based, kind of curriculums, reading, writing, math, social skills, life skills, you kind of name it, there'll be kind of some curriculum in the marketplace that we can now bring into the app, and you're ready to go. Now, when I say curriculum, I think precision teaching-based curriculum is much different than sort of your typical, here's step 1, step 2, step 3. We find most curriculum to be very procedural based, like you just follow this recipe, and if it doesn't work, well, do it again, right? Whereas precision teaching is very adaptive. It's honestly, there's this trend in education about personalized learning. Precision teaching owns that, right? There is no more personalized learning than what precision teachers do. And so what we want to do is give like frameworks and guidelines, like start with here, but always make decisions. Always make a change if your data says you should make a change. Do not continue. Don't go past, don't pass go straight to change kind of thing, right? Like don't continue. And people are making decisions now, the standard that some of our users are using, 5 to 8 program level decisions per program per day. Do I slice it back a little bit? Do I do another trial? Do I do another thing? And they're real-time doing visual analysis to make those decisions. And so when we say curriculum, it is within that framework where it is highly adaptive and very personalized based on the data of what you're seeing.
Right. Instead of doing 10 trial blocks in a row, and then the
yeah, somebody asked me
once a week, and
I was on a call, honestly, I was on call Monday, and she asked, okay, so where in Chartlytics can I put in like the minimum standard that we want 10 trials? It was exactly that question. I was like, well, listen, everybody asked that in the beginning, but about 2 months in, that question goes away because you realize now that 10 is arbitrary. Right? You might only need 2. You might need more. And if you need more than 10, you're probably trying to do too much. You need to slice the content or step back a little bit in your content because you're pushing too hard. They don't know the content. So a lot of those sort of standards, they just disappear because now you react 100% to the learner and the needs of the learner.
Cool. All right, more questions here. And Rebecca Byers is mining social media to find these questions that I can. So thank you so much for doing that.
Becca
awesome.
is on our team. I'll just put that out there.
Oh, okay.
Becca is our marketing manager at Chartlytics.
Right. Okay.
I think she is wonderful. She is on the ball all the time, helping to connect pain and questions to answers and hopefully solutions. So we are very lucky to have Becca on the team there.
Got it. Okay, so I was reading your formal name. So I didn't make the connection there. So got it, Becca. All right. So she pulled one from Instagram. I'm hoping to hear about how existing Central Reach users will be able to use the standard acceleration chart. Will CR data be expanded upon to include the SCC as one of the data collection type options? Anyways, so so that sounds like
100% is the goal, right? So we're going to start off where you'll manage a single set of client data and a single set of user data. You'll then be able to jump off into Chartlytics seamlessly without a separate login, and you can do your charting in Chartlytics. And that's kind of phase 1 on our integration plans. And this is all subject to change as we figure out like what's easy and not easy to do technically with the development teams. The ultimate goal, though, is within the Central Reach learning trees, and only Central Reach users will understand this, but within the learning tree, you'll be able to create a goal that is a pinpoint goal, which then graphs automatically on the standard acceleration chart embedded into the experience. And so that's kind of our end game goals that we have. But that's going to take time. That's 6 months, maybe 12 months away before we're able to get that truly integrated experience.
Hey everyone, as a BCBA, meeting your continuing ed needs can be challenging at times. That's why I have made selected episodes of the Behavioral Observations podcast available for Type 2 continuing education credits. That's right. You can meet a portion of your professional development requirements on the go. Currently, we have CEs for topics including functional assessment, ethics, and supervision. Come learn from podcast favorites such as Greg Hanley, Pat Fryman, Mark Dixon, as well as many other amazing guests. For more information, head on over to behavioralobservations.com/get-CEs.
So one thing I was curious about, I know this came up in conversation when I was out in Las Vegas with you guys at the 2-day workshop. With I don't think I had a conversation.
Which
with
we're going back there again. We're going to try and make that an annual thing in December, and maybe make it bigger. And now that we're part of the Central Reach family, maybe talk about how the best practices for billing, the best practices for scheduling, for managing your practice from an HR, paper performance modules, OBM and KPIs for your business. So we're thinking a little bigger now. But yeah, we loved Vegas. Was fun.
Yeah,
we had like 160 people there, which was amazing.
Yeah, so. that was a great time. So I don't think I had this conversation with you. I had it with some of the other folks at Chartlytics about the predictive nature of the chart and how insurance companies might favor that over other means of outcome measures and things like that. Can you talk a little bit more about how that could possibly play out? This is a lot of crystal ball stuff, but
Yeah. So I want to correct you. It's not predictive. It's projective. Right. So we can't predict. Right. And if we could, I wouldn't be here.
Okay.
We wouldn't be here. Right. I'd have that Powerball.
Sure.
Maybe I'd still be here. I enjoy what I do. So we're projecting. We can easily, because we're flattening out the curve, we can sort of project where they're going to go within the variance or the bounce envelope. And we can say within a certain degree, there's a lot of variables here, but generally we can say your behavior is going in this direction, and at some point in the future, it'll be around here. Right. So that's very interesting. So, as a, ABA professional, people kind of ask you, how long is this going to take? You know, like how long until my son masters this skill or my daughter masters this skill, right? Like how long are we going to be doing this? And with insurance companies, obviously, that's a very interesting question because, you know, in the ABA and behavioral sciences, you know, they don't have anywhere near the data they have on like the hard medical science, like heart health and things like that. We know that, you know, they have all this kind of rate of change and expectation data around various heart conditions. So they kind of understand what things are going to take from a time perspective and where you're going to get to. And I think one thing that's lacking in ABA is that kind of detail. Like if we put in 40 hours of services, what are we going to get out of it? And you know that no 40 hours is the same across any provider whatsoever, really. And so I think we're in an interesting position to be able to start not only projecting and helping people project when things are going to be attained, but literally understanding how so we did a webinar about composite analysis of behavior, and it's how components of behaviors get combined to create complex behaviors, and those complex behaviors are now component behaviors and more complex behaviors. The frequencies of all those things combined can kind of project where you need to work in terms of the components, as well as like can help us understand like the overall time it's going to take to get to this more complex behavior way out here downstream. I think that's very interesting information that insurance companies would love to have. And, you know, if you think about ABA and the history of insurance, it's not that long that they started actually covering ABA services. In fact, I think there's still states that don't make coverage mandatory, right? I think there's still...
Yeah, I would imagine, but it's not an area of my expertise. So
so I think it's they just are waiting for the data and waiting to understand. And since there's so much variability in how ABA is actually delivered, it's probably hard to get that information.
I see. So I know I'm kind of skipping around here, but there's a lot of cool things going on.
You really are. It's more than I do. So I commend you on that. It's good.
So you guys posted a blog post about what's going on in South Carolina with the with the project that's going on with fit learning and the second and third graders and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because those outcomes were remarkable, and again, it's just an example of how this stuff can be applied in regular ed settings, and with kids who are just maybe behind in skills and things like that. So before I kind of elaborate too far and potentially butcher the story, talk about how that it's just a fascinating story that I'd love to hear more of.
Yeah, so we partnered with Dr. Mary Sawyer of Fit Learners Atlanta, who is working with Aubrey Daniels to essentially start a fit learning center down in Atlanta. They've already started. But one of the things, with precision teaching is it's kind of ubiquitous in terms of its ability to, all it does is help you measure, right? Like at the core, it's a measurement science to understand, daily progress monitoring, right? That's it. At its core is what it's doing. But now there's all these types of sort of intervention techniques like frequency building, ACT, RFT, and if you combine them in these sort of free operant ways, and do you understand what the free operant's a common term, right? Okay. When you free up the learner to kind of grow at the rate that they want to grow at and do the things they want to do, Og Lindsay called it the 4 freedoms. You get these really kind of accelerated outcomes. And so we actually partnered to provide Chartlytics to the school district for the pilot that we did because obviously like hand charting on paper is time consuming and kind of would restrict the process from moving forward. And so we offered Chartlytics, which is very easy to learn. The kids end up charting. Most of our learners, we encourage them to chart themselves. So the kids, like I saw Kathy Fox on here, I think, and they have like 300 kids at the Hogland Learning Center that are charting themselves on Chartlytics, right? So when people say it's so hard to do, I'm like, well, come on, here's a third grader, right, with an autism diagnosis charting their own, reading progress and excited about daily growth. But anyway, the Lake City thing was very interesting because we partnered with Fit Learners and Dr. Mary Sawyer to essentially take like a light version of their curriculum. They have a humongous curriculum that they've been developing for decades, I guess now, and they're incorporating RFT into that. But we took a very simplified version of that, and Donnie Newsom over in Fit Reno put this together for the project, where we basically did two things. So Mary did like heavy one-on-one fit style coaching where they worked very directly with the students, telehealth. And then we did another one where we trained, or Mary did, and all this is on them. All we did was provide the software. She trained some college students to work with the kids to just do these simple frequency building exercises where you just do time practice, and you try to get better. Every time you do it, and you drop your dot and you see how you're going. She did this with them, and they trained it, and the results were just fantastic. It was you didn't get anywhere near the progress of like the one-on-one. I shouldn't say that, but you got very good progress, triple what they were getting in school, if not more than that, what they were getting in their normal education. And that kind of thing where you can take people that don't have a training in precision teaching, show them some basics of how you make decisions in the moment, how you run these frequency building exercises, and you get like 80%, 90% of the gains of like one-on-one type of interaction. So we were just showing how it could be scalable with the technology. And you're right, it's amazing testament to the power of precision teaching when you combine it with like the technology to make it easy and accessible for everybody. There was 2 total days of training, I believe, with the college interns, and I think only 2 hours of that were on Chartlytics. Right, like so, we just make the whole measurement science so easy to use.
Cool.
Yeah, but it was an amazing project, and we're looking forward to doing more there.
All right, very nice. So another kind of random turn here. I know Rick has going to be.
You're really good.
Rick Cabina.
Really good.
Yeah. It's no segue, right?
Hard stop, hard left.
That's right. So Rick's gonna be doing some stuff with a medical school. In
okay. So
I'm just trying to think of share a different application.
This is almost like this is going to be like a this is my life episode kind
of
thing.
That's right. So I want to keep you on your toes, Dave.
No, that's good. I'm good. So the thing like I said early on when we started talking, like precision measurement and ABA, precision teaching, we like to call it precision measurement because precision teaching is kind of an umbrella of a whole bunch of different sort of interventions and sort of contingency management kind of practices. Chartlytics really focused on just the measurement part, the SEC, taking data in real time. So that process is universal. Doesn't matter what you're doing. If it's human behavior, it's organism behavior, it's exactly what Skinner did with the operant chamber. We're just taking as close to real-time data as we can about the behaviors that we're trying to change. And so we're probably in about 14 research projects now, like at Botswana. It's like all over the world that we're in providing standard acceleration chart for research. And honestly, we think we can own or be very influential in the single case experimental design, single subject research design, which is a rapidly growing part of research. But the Albert Einstein School of Medicine, Rick just became an associate professor, I guess, there, so he's adding more to his CV. Marty Levy, who did a talk, and I really want to get this from the Standard Acceleration Society, they need to make it more widely available because it's locked behind a paywall. But Marty Levy did a talk where he showed how he's using clicker training, tag teaching, and free operant conditioning for orthopedic surgeon students, so people in school learning how to be orthopedic surgeons. And he's sort of applying ABA the same way you train like dogs. I'm probably going to I'm putting my foot in my mouth here, but positive reinforcement, right? So if you think about medical training, there's some TV shows, I forget what the name of it was, Scrubs, where it was like negative reinforcement, punishment, negative reinforcement, right? Well, he's like, why don't we just do positive reinforcement like we do with our dogs, right? Like let's just flip to positive. And so he's doing this there. But he's doing this really interesting frequency building technique with these students where they're practicing on, like, he spent so much time in I'm going to butcher his talk, but he spent so much time developing analogs for the types of procedures that you would do in orthopedic surgery. So in a tibia at the end, at a certain spot on the tibia, you have to drill a perfectly, precise angled hole at a precise depth, or you go through the other side kind of thing. And that's very expensive. Yeah, it's very expensive to train because like pig tibia bones that they use are expensive, and you only do it once because now the bones you just drill the hole, right? So he came up with all these novel ways of practicing. So he tried different materials, and he used like PVC and all these things. He put together this like complete like kit of materials. And what he did was he just had the students, drill these holes as fast as they could exactly, perfectly, high accuracy and high pace, right? And because, like, if you're in the operation room, or if your body is open, the longer it's open, the more risk you have for secondary infections and stuff like that. So the analog is, the example is, who would you rather do? Somebody that can do your procedure 100% in 4 hours, 100% correct in 4 hours, or 100% correct in 20 minutes? Which one would you pick, right? And so that's what they're after on this frequency building thing. So we're actually going to measure what it means to be a expert orthopedic surgeon. What are the frequencies of all those component behaviors that, when combined, give you an expert precision, expert orthopedic surgeon? So we're going to be able to quantify, and Rick hopes we can do this. We're going to be able to quantify, and this is what the research will help tell us if we can. What are the frequencies of all those component behaviors as they merge up into this behavioral genome of an orthopedic surgeon? So you got a 99.12 number. You're ready to go. Oh, you're only at 97. You're not ready to go. A little more practice, right? Wow. How cool would that be?
That would be super cool.
Yeah. So we're very excited about that thing. That thing will change. That study will change, we think, proficiency-based skill, professions to be totally objective.
That would be interesting too, from like a relicensure standpoint as well. Like, are someone's skills declining or what have you? You know? I have a friend of mine who's an airline pilot for Delta, and that sounds like an application where there's probably a limitless potential for this sort of thing. When I was chatting with him a few weeks ago, and we were talking about how that. Do you remember a while back that Southwest flight had that engine blowout? The pilot landed with one engine.
Yes, I do.
So I was asking about that. I'm like, so, do pilots across the spectrum get some sort of memo when something like this happens and say, hey guys, review your procedures about flying with one engine? He looked at me so casually. He's like, no. he's like, I know how to do it. I'm like, well, how? He's like, every year we go to at least he's speaking from Delta. They go to, wherever the Delta headquarters are. I think it's in Atlanta or Houston or something like that. And they have these simulators. And he's like, these simulators are so realistic. They're on hydraulic jacks and things like that.
Yeah.
And they put us through all the emergency procedures, and we don't get out of there until we do them right, And of course, I'm going ding, 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 ding. There's got to be some sort of, So when you say proficiency-based thing, and I'm thinking like retraining of high, high skill type of situations. But the look on his face was just so utterly confident because he's been put in that situation a gazillion times. And he was like saying, yeah, it's like the pilot was in midair, like was at cruising altitude. He's like, what really gets hairy is when that happens on takeoff and landing, and they've practiced all this stuff. And so he didn't say it, but I was wondering if he was saying like, well, they were, it was perhaps wasn't as difficult as he wasn't being cocky about it. He's not that type of dude, but it's just really interesting, and it kind of the practice to competency just really reminded me of the kind of stuff that we would do, and I was like, oh, it reminded me of what our previous conversations were about this, kind of med student training thing as well, and that might be an area of application. Can we get pilots trained faster? Like the Air Force right now has, I think they're coming up on, they're about to have like a crisis level shortage of fighter pilots. So
bring in the robots.
That's right. What does that mean for and I'm sure there's the washout rate is probably pretty significant, in those types of preparation programs. Anyway, so I guess the more examples you can come, there's probably limitless applications. So it's just fun.
Yeah,
to think about.
we think so too. And in some cases, like people are already kind of doing like fluency building, because like they're using time as a critical component. Like when you think about like mastering some social skills and things like that, like you give somebody a discrete trial, they do it correctly. You give them another one, 5 minutes later, they do it correctly, and your mastery criterion is 80% of 3 out of 5 times, or whatever. But that takes time out of the whole equation, right? In order to execute those maneuvers in the airplanes, you had to do them within a specific time or you crash, right? Like, so time is critical to everything we do. Everything, organisms do, time is a critical component. And our measurement systems and our decision-making systems are all mostly based on this percent correct ratio, which literally takes time out of the equation. So if I go and walk across the street 100% correctly, right, but it takes me an hour, I'm going to get run over, right? I'm going to get run over. So people kind of there's a misnomer about fluency and precision teaching is like you just go really fast. Like, no, you don't go really fast. You go to a natural pace where it's a fluent behavior, right? That's it. Just because it's a lot of times we do practice things fast, that's because you could do math facts 200 per minute or 100 per minute, You can get that fast. And if you get to that level, you have automaticity of that skill. You no longer spend any mental energy. There's just a brain study, which is great, a neuroscience study I just came across. I think I downloaded it. I'll find it. That proved exactly that. If you have automaticity skills, you no longer use your kind of learning part of your brain to figure out other things. And if you just get to mastery, you're still stuck on those algorithms. You're not freed up to work on these other algorithms. And so fluency to us is critical. It's the key, honestly.
Cool. Well, Dave, we've been chatting for a while here, as we typically do when we get a chance to catch up. We're going on like 52 minutes and change.
Oh, nice.
So,
I'm getting paid by the minute for this, right?
Yeah, the check's in the mail.
Sweet.
What is there anything else you want to leave listeners or viewers in this case? Wow, I'm so used to saying listeners. This is changing my medium here. But anything else you want folks to know, or any places for folks to go check out if they want to learn more about this stuff?
Yeah, so one is that we are very excited, Rick and myself, co-founders of Chartlytics, we're very excited about our merging with Central Reach. We think we're now going to have the resources and the backing and sort of the scope of size to really drive precision measurement forward like it's never been driven before. And so we have complete buy-in by not just Central Reach, but so Insight Venture Partners is the venture firm, growth equity firm, amazing people. I have conversations. They're so brilliant and smart. They've identified it as like best of breed clinical decision making, and they want to really push this forward. And so we're going to have resources that we could have never dreamed of. And we're very excited about that. And so we think we're just getting started. This is chapter 1 still that we're in of precision teaching. And I'd say to get more information about it, maybe we can add some things to your page, but you have on I can see down here below, which there's like a 3-minute lag, which is weird. I don't know how you get used to that. But go to chartlytics.com/Matt, and we have tons of resources. We have a special bundle we put together for watchers and listeners, right, of the Behavioral Observation podcast, where I think we're even giving away some free CEUs about just getting started with precision teaching and what it can do. And there's a whole list of resources that are available there, and we continually add to that as well. Yeah, thanks for putting that in there.
No problem. Cool.
Yeah, so that's. I always enjoy talking to you, Matt. I could probably just talk the rest of the morning.
There we go.
I have more meeting. I'm actually trying to escape meetings here anyway. So
okay. Well, good. If I can help the cause out,
Yeah, let's keep talking.
There you go. Yeah, it's funny. Because you see people like walking behind you. It's like, hey, people are actually doing work here. They see you, talking to a computer. All right, cool. Well, Dave, huge congratulations to you and to Rick. And to all the other awesome folks at Chartlytics.
We couldn't honestly about the folks at Chartlytics. We have just an amazing team. They live, breathe, sleep precision teaching. It runs through our blood.
That is absolutely true. Having spent time with many of your employees, that is one. We're out to dinner. People are talking about precision teaching, having coffee. It's like there's no off switch. It's like
it's part of the. It's such amazing when you see the outcomes we help people generate. It's just crazy, and it's hard to say. It's hard to not want to keep. Disseminating that, right? And so anyway, we wouldn't be here without the team we have today. I'm just so it's hard to put together. This is my 4th software company, I guess. It is really hard to get the kind of combination of team members and we're all bought in. Everybody's bought in. We're 110%, and that's a very awesome I've never experienced that before. So I'm totally lucky to have that team, and looking forward to building it and merging that culture here with Central Reach as well. So
very cool. All right. Well, Dave, thanks for joining us this morning. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations Podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.